This is Twisted Passages with award-winning author Marie Sutro. Now, let's take a deep dive into the dark world of psychological thrillers and meet the authors who created them.
Hello, and welcome to Twisted Passages. I'm your host, Marie Sutro, and today we have fantastic author Katie Garner here to talk about her new release, The Family Inside. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, thank you for having me, Marie.
I cannot wait to chat with you today. I am so glad you are here. Before we dive in, can you start us off with an overview of the story?
Yes, so The Family Inside follows a recently widowed single mom, Iris Blodgett. She's on the struggle bus. She just lost her job. Her house is getting foreclosed. She has nowhere to go. She's trying her hardest, but she's about to be homeless in a few days with her difficult, unruly 18-year-old daughter, Ellery. So when she confides in her new boyfriend, Hugh, about these difficulties, he has a solution that kind of seems too good to be true. He just sold his house and has moved in with his elderly mother to help her renovate her dilapidated mansion. And she has a cane and she can't do it herself and she doesn't want to hire any outside help. So that's why he's there. And then once Iris moves in with her daughter, things go sideways, of course. And surprise, family members are also living in the house, and it ensues from there.
And it sure does. It takes off like a shot out of the gates. I was so in love with this book from start to finish. I could not spend enough time with it. It was one of those that as I was getting closer and closer to the end, I'm counting the pages thinking, oh no, I don't want it to end. It was so good. The twists, the turns, you took us on a roller coaster ride like no other. But I want to start off with the way that you draw us into the story, this amazing atmospheric setting. Ravencliff. Can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration and what Ravencliff is for listeners?
Yeah, actually, Ravencliff is, of course, fictional, but it is based off of a real mansion that is in Philadelphia. It's called Raven Hill. And as I was like brainstorming this location, I had an image of what the house would look like in my head. And then I did a little research and I found that it actually does exist and it has a really cool name. So I made it Ravencliff because it's on the edge of a cliff. And I live on a town that's on the Delaware River. So I'm about a mile away from the river on a mountain. And there's a lot of old mansions on the cliff overlooking the river. And I always thought it was the coolest thing. And it kind of looks like they're going to fall down, like, you know, the craggy stones. And I don't know if I would ever be able to afford one of those giant mansions, but I could write about it.
And you did such an amazing job writing about it. This dilapidated mansion, the way you describe it is so cinematic, so Hitchcock that, I mean, it just really draws you in such an amazing way. And it's such a great place to put questions in everyone's mind, including your main character, Iris, who goes to live there. Mm-hmm. She's filled with so many questions. The reader is filled with so many questions. That way of storytelling, you took an interesting approach to it. You did 2 POVs. Can you tell us a little bit about that too?
Yeah, so the first POV is, of course, Iris. That's in the first person. She's the main character. But then I believe it's about 20 to 25% in. We switched to a second POV, which is her daughter, Ellery. And Ellery is going through some stuff too. You know, she I guess I'll give away a little spoiler. It's not the end of the book spoiler, but it's like the first 25% spoiler. Ellery goes missing. So it's her adventure when she is run away missing from the house. Lots of things happen. Iris knows she's not happy. Her daughter has done this before. She's run away after her father was killed. Iris, you know, is like, oh, she's acting out. She left and she tries to find her. So that's the second POV is Ellery going with her boyfriend. She wants to go across the country to escape.
The dream of all 18-year-olds, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What was so interesting in the way that you approached it was trauma that both Iris and Ellery are still dealing with. In Iris' case, it's her husband that she's lost. And in Ellery's case, it's her dad. And there's clearly a lot of unresolved trauma around that. But we also realize Iris has a lot of older unresolved trauma. The fact that you have two characters, it just reminded me so much of real life, because so many of us are dealing with trauma in one form or another, whether it's fresh, old, here, there, shared trauma. And it's so hard for us sometimes to be able to speak to each other in a way that honors what the other person's going through. And you just did such an amazing job of putting these two women, mother and daughter, together, two women who are really, really hurting, and making our hearts bleed because they can't seem to get through to one another.
Thank you. It's always tough to put yourself in a character's shoes, but once you really get to know them, they kind of talk to you. You know, Iris told me how I know this sounds a little, but Iris told me she was going through, you know, because she was with Jack, her husband, since she was a teenager. And I've been with my husband since I was 15. So I was kind of, wow, if something happened, God, how devastating would that be? How terrible would that be? And to have a daughter who, Ellery would have been 15 when her father passed, at like the most sensitive, delicate time in her life. And how would that look for a teenager going through all of those emotions? And I mean, I personally would act out. I would fall into the wrong crowd. I have no doubt. So that's unfortunately where Ellery is going.
And it's so understandable, because that pain, on top of what's for Iris, this new blossoming relationship with Hugh, that can be very difficult for kids, especially teenage kids, to navigate as they're starting to dabble in relationships and figure out what relationships are, and who they are as a person in a relationship.
Yeah. Ellery definitely senses those red flags with Hugh. In the beginning, it's she doesn't want her mom to move on or forget about her father, which is understandable. But Iris tries. She wants to move on. She's still young. She's in her 30s. Maybe she doesn't want to get married again, but you know, hey, you gotta move on eventually, right? So Ellery just views it totally different. You know, mystery and thrillers are all about the suspense and the tension. So you know, we love to create the tension between the family members.
And one of the places where the suspense was so intense and powerful was in the world that's here, but maybe isn't, meaning there's allusions to not necessarily ghosts in this story, but come on, you gave us Ravencliff. So it's
Yeah.
got to be somewhat haunted or something. You keep expecting it to be, right? And there is this kind of specter, as we've said, hanging over Iris and Ellery, the specter of Jack. And what is Jack thinking, or how is Jack feeling? And unfortunately, he can't voice those opinions. But again, you are in this place that is so thick with atmosphere. You push those boundaries a little bit for me. Like, there were those suspense moments where I was like, oh my gosh, is she going to like play with paranormal? Is she going to get into little horror elements? Like, I didn't know where you were. It was so fun.
Thank you. Yeah, you know, right in the beginning, I knew I wanted to make Ravencliff its own character. And there are some lines in the book that I included where it's like, the house is breathing and it doesn't like this. And you know, if there's blood on the floor, the house is like, you know, oh, it likes the blood. It's like, okay, wait a minute, what kind of place is this? And in the end, you find out what kind of place it is. Yeah, I definitely wanted to make it its own character with its own emotions, but not in a super paranormal way. There's just hints of it. Hopefully everything is explained in the end. But yeah, I do like to play with some genres, horror, all genres. I like to cross read a lot. When I first started getting into writing, I read A Discovery of Witches. Who doesn't love that book? That and then it became a series. I mean, and when I read it, the house that the ants live in was its own character, and it actually was, you know, like witch. It had a witchy, spell on it, so it did move. And I think there was a scene where they called a book and it, like, the fireplace would spit it out. So I always loved that idea of like a setting being its own person. So while I didn't go into the whole like paranormal aspect of it, I kind of did give a little nod to that.
Well, it was so fun and made for so many pulse pounding moments because, like any good spooky gothic kind of mansion, it has locked doors. And I loved that you used the physical locked doors in Ravencliff, and you also played very much upon the locked doors inside each of the characters, because there's a lot of secrets, aren't there?
Oh yeah. Yeah. A lot. Every character has something going on. And I think during the first draft, there were more family members, but it got a little bit like too populated in the house. It was like, okay, we can't have 6 people in here. So I did narrow it down to Hugh, the boyfriend's brother, his sister, and then his brother's wife, so his sister-in-law, and then the mother, Birdie. And Birdie was the first family member that came to my mind, and she came to me very vividly. And then, the rest of her family just, came after that. So
she is the perfect matriarch for that
yeah.
home and that family. Her clothing, her nails, everything about her is so perfect. Her turns of phrase. Sometimes people will come up behind you and say something, and you'll describe that in the book, and you can just tell it's Birdie based on
Yeah.
thing. And I love that. One of the other things that I loved was, again, how fast paced this book was, how pulse pounding. And for me, I think you really set it up that way structurally, because you start us off with a different style of narration. You start us off with a story about some police activity, correct?
Yeah, yeah, the news article, I kind of, that's a big clue. I'm giving it right up front. I'm serving the goods to hook you, but also let you know what you're in for. Like, okay, this isn't going to be a romance. Don't get that impression. There are secrets and, bodies and things like that. I do lead you to the events that are going to happen on the last day of the book, and then the book starts. I believe it's like about a week before that article is published. So that's how it goes. And then there's also one thing before that, which is just an unknown person digging a grave for someone. So
Yes.
it's up to you to figure out who is who.
Yes. It is so masterful because, again, you start us off with the mystery: who's speaking, who's the grave for, and all of that good stuff. Then you give us this objective story.
Yeah.
And then you frame the entire storytelling experience around that countdown clock to bring us back. And oh my gosh, it was just, lots of people will do that. They'll try to get there, but I was counting my breaths.
Thank you. Thank you. I was too. When I write it, I was like, there were times I cry sometimes every time I read certain scenes in my other first book too that I ended. There are some scenes I read it and I just, even though I've read it about 150 times, I still, get teary-eyed.
I totally see that. It was definitely heartstrings being pulled so many places, and not just the Iris and Ellery relationship, but other situations for other characters. What was interesting as well to me was when we talk about the secrets, Iris as our main character telling us her story in her first person perspective. There's certain things she doesn't want to tell us. And she admits that there's certain things she doesn't tell herself, certain memories she has that she doesn't want to go back into. What made you come up with that idea to tease us and say, maybe she's an unreliable narrator, or maybe she just doesn't want to tell you what's really going on?
Yeah. Well, it's really funny because, like I said, my first book has a very unreliable narrator. And you know that from page 1. With Iris, I kind of wanted to go in a different direction and kind of make her seem reliable. And is she not? And I didn't want to come right out front and make it seem like she was completely unreliable, because for the most part she is kind of reliable. But then as you read, you find out, okay, what is she having these flashbacks to? What is going on here? What is she seeing? So that all connects in the end. Yeah, so she's going through a lot of different layers of her own issues from the past and then the present. So yeah, Iris is going through a lot, and I tried to write her where she is just like a very nice, kind, giving person who's just trying her best, because one of my fears is to lose everything like Iris does. And I wanted to kind of model her off of someone who would handle it in a way that I wouldn't. I would totally have a meltdown. But she handles it, I think, with grace, and she handles it pretty well.
She really does. One of the things that's interesting about her is she doesn't want for much. And the guy she's in this relationship with, Hugh, he kind of has everything. And they're on either side of that needs and wants spectrum. Putting the two of them together, even down to the way they dress sometimes. But he's so very tender and supportive, and she's very loving and very grateful for everything he's doing for her as well. So it's such a beautiful relationship to watch play out. And at the same time, there's other folks in the house who maybe don't see Iris as that good-hearted person who's willing to kind of take them for the team. And it's fun because you play with that through the other character's eyes and make us question Iris and how reliable of a narrator she is, and what the motives are.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, the relationship between Iris and Hugh in another parallel universe would have been great. But it's a mystery and thriller, psychological thriller. You can't always have everything you want. But yeah, the other family members, everyone has their different goggles on, right? Some people view her like Hugh's sister, for example, seems to see her in a positive light, but his brother does not. So he's like a tormentor to her. And then Bertie, has her own set of issues with her. So yeah, it's like every family member is going to receive this new stranger differently,
which was so great because it was so believable and real, even though it's a thriller. So there's going to be bigger than life ideas in it. We can all relate to that. And when you put this poor woman in this house with folks that she's never met before, and it's his family, oh my goodness, I think every person in the world who's ever had to go to meet the family, let alone, oh, hi, I'm here. Here's my kid. Oh, and here's my baggage.
Yeah. And I think she says that when she first moves in, like, here I am moving with my 18-year-old into a stranger's house. Like, it's not where I wanted to be in my life. And hi, future mother-in-law, possibly, or, like.
Yeah, I mean, it is beyond cringy, and I don't think anyone can read that without just like their back teeth grinding, just feeling for her so much.
Yeah, I really put Iris through it. Sorry, Iris.
You did, but it was worth the payoff. I'm so sorry, Iris, but it was worth it. On the vein of secrets, sometimes people will tell lies to cover secrets, and in this story, and this question isn't necessarily specific to the story, but kind of in general about how we all are. There's those lies that we tell other people, sometimes little white lies that are meant to help or meant to boost someone's ego in a moment or get them to have hope for the future. But then there's the bigger lies. Mm-hmm. And then there's the other category, which is the lies we tell ourselves. Why do you think lies feature so much in the human experience, for good or for bad, for groups or internally?
Well, I mean, for example, with Hugh, he has a lot of lies, as does Iris and everyone else. But I think it's because they kind of want to create a different version of themselves with other people. So he's only been with Iris for a couple months. So it's still new and it's still fresh. And he wants to step into this like different version of himself with her. And so I think that's where the lies start. And once those little white lies start, and your relationship continues and those same issues keep popping up, the lies are going to start popping up too. And you either have to come out with it or keep the lies going, and they just grow and grow and grow. And sometimes, you can tell when someone is lying, and you're just going to pick and pick and pick and figure it out on your own. And you're going to get to the bottom of it if they're not going to tell it to you. So yeah, their lies does feature pretty heavily in this book. Everyone has something, and whether or not they think it's for the best to keep those secrets, a secret, that's up to their own discretion.
Well, again, absolutely amazing. The lies, everything down to the window dressings in the house. And I will just say, I do not want to spoil it for anyone, but there is a concept about snow falling that is one of the most beautiful, haunting things I have read. And that will be an image that always stays with me.
Aww.
I think you mentioned it twice, and it is amazing. I mean, this book is just so full of Easter eggs everywhere. But before I keep gushing and keeping you here forever, for folks like me who are now impassioned fans of yours, and for existing fans, where is the best place for people to find you?
I am mostly on Instagram. You can find me at Katie Writes Mystery. I try to post as often as I can, but life is life. I am on there. I'm not really on Twitter/X too much, or Facebook. So you can find me on Instagram.
Awesome. Again, an amazing read from start to finish, Katie. I can't wait for your next book.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Again,
Marie.
Family Inside, a phenomenal read. Thank you again for joining me, Katie.
Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Twisted Passages. We hope to see you next time.